We are beginning a brand new series, so if this is like your first or second time, welcome. This is really a good day for you to be here. We're starting a new series called Elisha. Elisha. He is the lesser known of the Eli ... in the Bible, Elisha. And my hope, here's my agenda for this series, is that this is going to spark something in you. You'll be able to look back at these next 4 weeks and recognize that this series has done something in you, in your faith, and helped you take a step towards what God wants for you. That's my hope, is that this will be a defining moment that you'll be able to look back years later and realize that God did something eternal in you through this series as we go through this together. Now, as we start today, I'm going to ask you this question. Let's play this Have You Ever game. You know that game, Have You Ever? So, have you ever been watching somebody and called them just to see whether or not they would respond to your call? Anybody ever done that before? Never done that before, huh? Because we want to know, right? We want to know if they value my call or if they're just going to send it to voicemail or decline the call. So I did this with my son the other day because I was watching him and his buddies skateboard across a parking lot, and they were heading to McDonald's, and they didn't see me, but I saw them. And I wanted to see if he would answer my call with all of his buddies. And then at the end I was going to say, I love you, just to see how he would respond to that as well, you know, just to make it extra tough. So I called him, and man, he picked up right away. And then I said, at the end, I just said, what are you up to? And he told me what he's up to. And I said, okay, son, I love you. And he just said, yeah. Which I know means, Dad, I love you and I appreciate you and so grateful. In his he's a guy, teenage guy, so that's what all of that means. My kids are awesome. They pick up their phone. But how many of you know how it is, right? When you get a call and like you're in the middle of something, or you know that conversation is going to be an energy-intensive conversation. So you're looking at the call and it's like, man, I'm not sure I want to have that conversation right now. Or this is a really inconvenient moment. I'm not sure I want to answer this because it's going to break up my flow or what I got going on and what I want to do. And so anybody, you just ever you hit decline? Anybody? I know the rest of you are just liars, man. I'm gonna find you when you're not watching and call you and see what you do, or you just let it go to voicemail, right? You just let it go to voicemail, and I'm glad for that because, obviously it does help us not get disrupted and interrupted at certain points. And but let me ask you this question: Have you ever done that with God? Have you ever felt like God calling you and you're just like, nah, not now. I don't want to have that conversation right now. Or this is just not a convenient moment. Or man, I just got my own stuff going on. I can't take a break to listen to you because I'm in the middle of my thing. And so we just hit decline or just let it go to voicemail. Anybody ever done that? Done that one? That one guy in the back there has. Well, we've all done that, right? We've all done that. I mean, that's part of being human is like, I'm just not ready for that. And we just send it to voicemail. And I want to encourage you, when God calls you, invites you to participate with Him, it's because He's after this one thing. He's after your heart. That's what He wants. He wants your heart. He wants to give you an opportunity to show you how much He loves you and how much He loves the people He wants you to love. And it's only when we respond to the call of God that we get the ability to see how much God loves us and He loves the people that He wants us to love. But it is so disruptive, isn't it? It is just so disruptive because I've got plans for my life. I've got a plan for Gregg, and I want to see it accomplished. And sometimes God's plan comes at the most inopportune times, and it is disruptive. But if we're followers of Christ, and I'm just going to speak for myself, as a follower of Jesus, man, I don't want to sit back in the stands of life going, it's great they're doing that. That's great they're doing that. I want to be on the field. I mean, I want my life to make a difference in other people's lives, right? Even if you're not a follower of Christ, how many of you say, man, I don't want to just sit back and watch life go by. I want to be playing in this thing. How many of you would say that? I'm just going to make sure we're going to put a glass underneath your face to make sure you're alive and breathing. We want to make a difference, right? We want to make a difference in this lifetime, whether you're a follower of Jesus or not. And God says, man, I want you to make a difference as well. So I'm going to invite you into this opportunity. And when God calls, it is always disruptive. Almost always. But when you answer God's call, it will take you places, and it will lead you in your life and in your relationship with God to the next level, to the next place that He wants to take you to. Always. But there's always the tension of it being disruptive. So I'm going to look at, in the book of Elisha, or in the book of Kings, this guy named Elisha, and this interaction that he has where God calls him into something. And as we begin looking at this, before Elisha is a guy named Elijah. And this guy named Elijah, he's probably the more known of the two. He was a bold, daring, full of faith spokesperson for God. In the Bible, it's called a prophet. He spoke messages from God to the people on behalf of God. That was his ministry. That was his area of service to God. And he was a bold guy and did some incredible things. Now, at one point in his life, he basically made a mockery of this god named Baal. And when he did that, he offended this woman named Jezebel, who was the queen of Israel. And when he offended the queen of Israel, she got ticked off at him, and she basically threatened and said, look, my life's mission now is to kill you. And if I don't do that, may I be like these other people that you've already just humiliated. And when she said that, and when she began chasing him, it did something in Elisha. It scared him. And he went into this season of his life where he seems to be really struggling. It seems to be, like depression. He's struggling physically, he's struggling emotionally, and he's struggling spiritually. And he never actually, from what I see and from what many scholars see, never really actually seems to overcome it fully. And but in this period of struggle, God meets him and God gives him some instructions. Part of the instruction is for him to go find the successor. Elijah, you've been doing this for all these years, but now I want you to go choose the person that I have who's going to succeed you in your ministry, and he's going to be a spokesperson for me to all of Israel. And it's this guy named Elisha. Now look, this is what's really important. Lock in here. This is what's really important. Elisha he seemed to be a pretty typical guy. He wasn't a son of a priest, or he wasn't in the school. They had a school for prophets. He wasn't in the school of prophets. He was actually a young business owner, probably working his family farm when Elijah finds him. He's not your typical prophet kind of guy. He's a very relatively ordinary guy. Seems to be from a wealthy family who has a farm, and he's a farmer. He's doing farming. And this is what happens. Elijah comes to him, and so Elijah went from there, and he found Elisha, the son of Shaphat, and he was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen. That's why many people think that he was probably well off, because he didn't just have a small farm process. He had 12 different yoke and 12 different oxen. He had a lot of workers on his field. And Elijah himself was not just watching this happen, he was working it himself. He himself was driving the 12th pair. Elijah went up from there, and he threw his cloak around him. And then Elijah then left his oxen, and he ran after Elijah. And he said, let me kiss my mother and father and say goodbye. And he said, and then I will come with you. But Elijah replied, go back. What have I done to you? And so Elijah left him, and he went back, and he took his yoke of oxen. Check this out. He takes his yoke of oxen. The yoke is the thing that they put around the oxen's neck. Normally they had like 2 oxen that were similar in strength, so the plow would go straight, and they put this wooden harness around them. They would attach it to a plow, and it would cut grooves into the ground, and then they would plant in the grooves. He takes this is like taking your Caterpillar or your John Deere equipment and selling them. He takes this thing, he takes this yoke, he slaughters the ox, he burns the plow equipment, and then he gives the meat to the people, and they ate. And then he set out to follow Elijah and become his servant. Okay, so I'm going to go back to this. We're going to go back and just kind of break this down, see what's happening here. So we'll go back to the beginning. So Elijah went from there, and he found Elisha, the son of Shaphat, and he was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen. Now, look, I think this is a significant scripture because when Elijah finds this guy named Elisha, he is plowing. He's not even just watching the work. He has his hands on the plow, and he's plowing behind this day after day. Now, think about this. Every morning, he gets up and he plows oxen until the sun goes down, and then he eats a meal, and then he does whatever he does in the darkness, and then he goes to bed, and he gets up and he does it again. Day after day after day after day, and it is monotonous, right? Because here's what he's looking at every single day. That's not a sexy view. That's every single day. That is a monotonous view. Every day he gets up and that's what he looks at all day long. It's that same feeling, because some of you feel like you're doing this as well. You're living your life, and every day I'm getting up, and I'm looking at the behind of oxen, and I go to the same workplace, and I clock in that same clock, and I work with the same people, doing the same thing over and over and over. You're a student, and you go to school, and you work your job to pay your bills. You go home, get some food, you study, you binge a little bit on Netflix, you go to bed, you wake up, press repeat, and you do the same thing over and over, and it is monotonous. And in the moment of temptation to quit, Elisha doesn't do that. Some of you, your parents, you know what this is like. Your life is defined by 3 Ds. You got dirty diapers, you got dirty laundry, and you got dirty dishes. And then when they get older, you're driving, you're Uber, and you're doing that, and you press repeat, and you're doing it over and over, and life is monotonous. And in the midst of the monotony, Elisha is faithful. He is faithful. And I'm not really sure why God did choose Elisha, but I think it may have to do with his faithfulness. In the midst of the day-to-day, God looks for people who are faithful to reward them with more. In fact, Jesus said that when you're faithful in a little bit, God says, I will make you a ruler over much. And so God looks for people who are faithful, maybe people like Elisha, who day after day are doing the little things that they need to do. And there's one moment where God steps in, and he does this with Elisha, and he's about to do something totally new and cause his impact to go to the next level. But I think one of the reasons why God chose somebody like him is because he was faithful in the day-to-day. Some of you have been faithful in the day-to-day, and it's grown monotonous. I want to encourage you to continue to be faithful in the day-to-day and watch God invade your monotony and take your life to the next level as he calls you to do something that will have greater impact. And when he does that, the question is, how will you respond? So as we go on here, this is how Elisha responds. Or Elijah takes his cloak and he throws it around him. Now the cloak was like a garment that they would wear. In my office, my wife wears this garment every day she's in the office because it is so cold in our office that she has to wear a blanket. Well, the Old Testament prophets would wear a cloak. It was a covering. It was a garment. It was called a mantle. It was a sign that they were spokespeople for God. It was a sign that they held this prophetic ministry, and they had this authority from God to speak on his behalf to the people. And Elijah takes his cloak, representing his ministry and his authority, and he puts it on Elisha, basically saying, this covering, this mantle that's been on me, it is now on you. This ministry and this sign and this authority that has been on me to be a spokesperson on behalf of God, it is now on you. In the same way that God has been with me, he's now going to be with you as you go to fulfill your ministry. This ministry God is now calling you into. And in this moment, he calls Elisha on behalf of God into this new ministry of greater impact. A guy who was faithfully plowing his field with a yoke of oxen. And this is his response. He says this. Elisha then, he left his oxen. And he ran after Elijah. And he said, let me kiss my mother and father and mother. And he said, and then I'll come with you. And Elisha's response is kind of off-putting, but let me explain it to you. He says, go back, Elisha replied. What have I done to you? So here's what Elijah is saying in this moment. This is not me calling you to anything. I'm not your boss. You don't have to tell me. This is God. So whatever you're going to do, you do in response to God. I've done my job by calling you. Now you need to decide what you're going to do. I'm not your boss. God is your boss. And so he says, if you want to go back and call and tell your family you're going on this journey and you want to say goodbye, go ahead and do that. You don't report to me. You really report to God. And this deal is between you and him. How you respond is not an issue between you and me. It's an issue between you and him. And this is how Elisha responds. He immediately leaves everything to chase after Elijah. I mean, this is pretty awesome, isn't it? This means that you don't have to fully understand what God is calling you to obey Him immediately. In fact, some of you have kind of been feeling this little bit of a calling, and you go, well, I'm not a Christian. That's okay. God speaks to everybody. He's trying to see who's just listening to me, who will respond to my voice. But most of us, we need to have the full plan, right? I need to know A, B, C, D, and Z before I take the first step. And Elisha doesn't know that. He doesn't have to have that. He basically has the first step, which is come, I'm calling you to be a prophet, and he goes. And in our lives, most often, it is just a single word that God will speak to us to call us into something new. In the Old Testament, when He wanted to call this guy named Abraham to move his family from where they were to the place where God wanted them to be, God gives him this one word. He says, Abraham, go. I want you to go from where you are to the land that I've chosen to give you. When He calls Moses, He says, Moses, I want you to go. I want you to go to this guy named Pharaoh, and I want you to tell him, let my people go. When He talks to this other follower of Jesus, is having this conversation with this guy named Peter, and in this moment, you may kind of be familiar with the story. Jesus is walking on the water, and like any good disciple, Peter wants to be exactly like his master, and so Peter says, hey, can I come out and do what you're doing? And Jesus says one word, come. It's just one word. Normally when God speaks, it's just one word or one small phrase. And He says, come, I'll give you the first step. And after you take the first step, then He begins to make the next step known. It's just come. And so Peter comes out on the water. For some of us, you're married, and the word for you is stay. You just need to stay in that marriage and fight for your marriage. For some of you, it's a phrase. It's water your lawn, right? The grass is starting to look greener on somebody else's lawn, and so the phrase for you is just, okay, start watering your lawn instead of looking at somebody else's lawn, right? For some of you, you've been in your heart, you've been wanting to start a business, and maybe the word for you is just start. You want to go back to school, I don't know, I'm too old, I don't know, it might be too hard, I don't know if I can finish. God's not asking you if you can finish, He's just wanting you to start. It just might be start, it just might be go. Just take that first class. Go to HCC. Go to KCC. Go online and take that class. Go. For some of you, it's in your workplace. In your workplace. And you've been, you've built in your workplace, and now you feel like God's saying, man, it's time to venture out. And maybe for you, it's just trust me. Trust me. Trust me. For some of you, you've got health issues. Maybe the word for you is just, trust. Trust. That even in your state, I can meet you in that state. I don't know what it is, but oftentimes it's just that single word. Here's the first word that God spoke to me when I became a follower of Jesus at the age of 20 years old. I was in college. The first word that God spoke to me after I prayed that beautiful prayer, God, I love you, I want to serve you, I want to know you. And I felt like God said, great, break up. Wait a minute, what? You know that girl that you're going out with? Your relationship with her will always compete with your relationship with me. If you want to follow me and do what I want, you're going to have to take a step of faith to break up. That was still to this day probably one of the most difficult things that I felt like I had to do, although in the moment it was the clearest thing that I think I've ever heard. It was just done. That relationship, Greg, is done. And it wasn't because she was a bad person. It was because my heart was so engrossed in that relationship. God knew that I could never follow Him and also have that relationship with her. And to this day, the best decision I ever made was just to trust God and say, God, I need faith to be able to do this, but I want you more than I want that or any other thing. And that set me off on a trajectory. And then after that, it was just a bunch of different words anyway, I'll talk about them a little bit later as we go on here. But it's usually just that one thing. And when God calls us, it will disrupt our lives. But when we answer the call of God, regardless of what it is, when we answer the call of God, it will take your faith, your relationship with Him to the next level and to the place where God wants you to go and give you the opportunity to do what He wants you to do. But like Elisha, we have to be willing to obey immediately, even if we don't fully understand. And oftentimes, it's just that one word. And then as we go on in the scripture, it says this. So Elisha, he does this. So Elisha left him, and he went back, and he took his yoke of oxen, and he slaughtered them. So think about this now. Elisha is getting rid of plan B. This is not, I will follow God as long as things go the way that I want. It's not what this is. This is, God, I want you, and I want what you want, regardless of my personal agenda. In fact, he makes sure that there is no turning back. He takes the animals that were the instruments for his farming, and he kills them, and then he burns. And definitely, I am not advocating, don't go back to your workplace and burn your work down. It's not what I'm advocating for. I'm just saying he made a decision, and then he took his plow equipment, and he made a big fire out of them. Think about this scenario, right? This is the young man who's running the family farm. He goes and he takes all the cows, all the oxen, and the plow instruments. He makes this big fire, and he has a big barbecue because he has received the call of God, and so he is turning his back on and closing the door to everything in the past. And every plan B and opportunity, there's only one plan. It is to obey God into his future. And to make sure that he's not tempted to go back, he burns the plow. And then he follows after him. Dude, that's crazy. I mean, I'm sure Dad and Mom were not happy with that moment. But he wanted to make it clear that there was no going back. There was no going back. And in your notes this morning, this is so true. The ones that God is able to use the most are those who hold on to the least. The ones that God is able to work through and do what he wants to do through the most are those who are holding on to the least. In the New Testament, there is this similar moment where Jesus where he's calling his followers to follow after him. And here's how it goes. And as Jesus calls his first 12, he says this: as Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. And he says to them, "Come, follow me." And Jesus said, "I will send you out to fish for people." So Jesus comes to them, and a lot of this has never really made sense to me, and it's because I didn't understand what was happening in this moment. So let me explain to you a little bit what's happening in this moment, and I think it'll make more sense. Come, follow me. And Jesus says, the same way that I'm calling people to follow is what you will be doing. You will be fishing for people. Now, in the region that he's doing this is an area called Galilee. And Galilee has been kind of given the short end of the stick. It actually wasn't a bunch of uneducated people. It was a place where a lot of the rabbis were actually chosen from. And so here's the process of becoming a rabbi. Most of the Israelite kids, they would begin school at about 4, 5, or 6. And they would attend a school called Bet Sefer for about 4 years until they were about 10 years old. And in this school, they would study the Torah, which is the first 5 books of what we call our Old Testament. And most of them would become so proficient, listen to this, in studying the scriptures. They were so hungry to be able to know God and to be able to reproduce what they had learned that they would literally memorize the first 5 books of the Old Testament from the ages of 6 to 10. So look, if you have a problem reading your Bible and you go, I'm just not motivated to do that, this should encourage you. Their hunger for God led them to memorize the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Then some of them would not continue on. Some of them would go into their family business. Some of them would continue on, and in the rest of their school, they would then study the prophets and the poetic and wisdom books and the historical books. The rest of what we call our Old Testament, many of them memorizing significant chapters and portions of the Old Testament as well. And then a select few of them, those who were wanting to and were qualified, would go and try and become rabbis, teachers. The others would go into their family business. And so in this moment now, Jesus, and here's the process for becoming a rabbi, you would go and find a rabbi that you wanted to attach yourself to, because becoming a rabbi meant not just learning what they knew, it actually meant becoming like they were. And so it didn't mean just learning and being a pupil of. It meant following them and imitating everything that they did and going with them everywhere to become a rabbi. And so they would come to the rabbi and they would ask the rabbi if they could attach themselves and become one of the rabbi's disciples. And they would say something to the effect of, "Can I follow you?" And then the rabbi would do his own reconnaissance and figure out if this was somebody that they were willing to invest in as a disciple. Does this person have the ability to communicate the same things that I'm communicating? Do they believe in this? And are they willing to make the sacrifices to be a rabbi as I am and to go and fish for people? And if the rabbi felt good, he would say this, "Come, follow me." Now, the really interesting thing about this is that Jesus doesn't wait for them to ask him. He goes and finds them. And the ones that he found were probably ones that had gotten passed over in the other schools. Because they're back doing their family business. They're fishermen, which wasn't a bad thing. If you didn't make it in one of the schools, you could just go and be a godly person in one of the schools. So there's these men of God who are fishing, but for some reason the other rabbis didn't see that they had what it took. Now look, here's the important part. I said all that to say this. Jesus looked past what the other rabbis couldn't see, and he believed that they had what it took. Jesus believed in them. At the end of service today, I'm going to ask you, give you the opportunity to put your faith in Jesus. But here's what Jesus does. Jesus puts his faith in them. And I'm going to ask you to believe in Jesus. But Jesus says, man, I believe in you. I believe that you can be like me. I believe that you can do what I do. I believe in you. And he finds these 12 who've been passed over in these other schools, and he sees something in them, and he calls them to be his followers. And God saw something in Elisha and sent Elijah. And when God calls you, he sees something in you. He may send a person. He may speak to you himself. But when he calls you, even if you go, you know what, I could never, and you don't know my background, and you don't know what I'm struggling with right now, it really doesn't matter. It's really less about you and more about the God who calls you. And he believes in you. And when he calls you, he believes in you. And the ones that God is able to use are not those who are the most qualified and the most capable and the most educated and the most learned. They're the ones who are holding on to the least in life. And in the same way in this story, as we go back to book of Mark, he says, "Come follow me and I will send you out to fish for people." And immediately at once they left their nets and they followed him. And we'll go on. And when he had gone a little further, he saw James, the son of Zebedee, and John in a boat and preparing their nets. And without delay, he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in a boat with the hired men, and they followed him. God is looking for people who will leave behind what they're holding on to follow him. It's not the most educated, the most qualified. It's those who are holding on to the least. It reminds me of this. Have you ever seen this the monkey trap? The way that they actually trap monkeys is by hollowing out a coconut and then by putting something enticing inside the coconut. So when the monkey, and the hole is just big enough for the monkey to get their hand in there, but once they get their hand in there, they grab onto what's in there. And because they're grabbing onto what's in there, their hand is balled up in a fist. And their fist is too big to pull out. And even when the trappers begin to come, and I would encourage you, don't go watch videos of this because it's kind of sad. The monkey will struggle, but it will not be able to escape because it's holding on to and is not willing to let go of what it's holding on to. It looks like this. I'm not letting go. And because it won't let go, it's not able to get free. God is able to use not those who are the most qualified, but those who are holding on to the least in their life. About 34 years ago, I got this call from God. It was one of those moments in my life where I had my plan already mapped out for me, and it was such a disruptive time in my life. I had just finished graduating from college, and just to let you know a little bit about me, from the time I was 4 years old, I wanted to be a doctor. That's what I've always wanted to do. And when I became a Christian at the age of 20, I said, it's no problem. I'll just be a Christian missionary, doctor. and I'll go around the world and serve people as a doctor. But when I said that to myself, I got this little gnawing feeling like there was a plow that I had to burn that I hadn't burned yet. And so this call was coming up on my caller ID for a little bit of time, and it was such a disruptive. I kind of knew the conversation that I felt like God wanted to have with me. And it was such an inconvenient moment because I already had Gregg's plan for Gregg. And it was a good plan. It wasn't a bad plan. It was a good plan. God, I'm going to go serve you as a missionary doctor around the world. And so for about 2 weeks, I just didn't answer the call. I just hitting decline, surely, God, there's somebody else that can do this. And then one day, I had the courage to receive that call. And I felt like God said, hey, Gregg, you give me a lot of things, but you've never really given me your future. Will you trust me with your future? And then I said, staticky, going through a tunnel. And then I called him back about 2 weeks later, and I said, okay, I'm willing. But you're not going to take this away, right? Like that monkey holding on to that thing. And God said, you're not ready to talk yet. I'll come back in 2 weeks. So I wrestled for another period of time, and then finally we both answered the call. And I said, God, whatever you want me to do is going to be significantly better than whatever I want me to do. So yes, of course, God, you deserve everything. I'm willing to burn whatever I need to burn to follow after you. And so God, I just remember saying, are you willing to lay down your career after going through 4 years, my undergraduate, taking the MCAT, studying for that, parents paying for applications to medical school and all of that? Are you willing to burn that so you can follow me to reach college students on the university campus? And I said, Jesus, I don't know if I'm ready or if I can, but you obviously believe so I'll do it. One of the best decisions and also the worst decisions I could have made at the same time. Best decision because it changed the trajectory of my life at that moment. Because again, when God calls, even though it disrupts your life, there is nothing that you can do that is more important than answering God's call to go. Even if you don't have the full picture, obey Him immediately. And even if you think you're not qualified, God is not just looking for those who feel like they're qualified. He's looking for those who are willing to hold on to less. And it's changed the course of my life and of the people that I've been involved with. My parents included. It was difficult because my parents were ticked off. Do you know how much money we just spent for you? You just spent your whole 4 years building towards this. You just spent all this money applying to medical schools, and you've been going on interviews. All this time, energy, and money, and now you're going to go raise partnership to live as a missionary to reach college students? I don't think so. My dad was particularly happy with the decision. They since then have come to know Christ and are our biggest fans in what we do. Couldn't be more happy with that decision, which seemed like such a difficult one at the moment. But when you answer the call of God, God will take you to where He wants to take you, and your faith will go to a completely new dimension. It reminds me of the guy in my small group who told me that he knew he wasn't being the dad that God had called him to be. And there was a big reason why, because he drank a lot. And he drank a lot to medicate the death of his wife. His wife got killed in a tragic accident, and it broke his heart. And so he drank to medicate, and he was in a depression and in a funk. And God said, look, you cannot be the dad that I want you to be for these kids if you keep doing that. You've got to stop doing that. And so he decided to burn the plow and to get rid of the beer bottles and to get rid of the medication. And in a moment, he followed God out of that and left the past behind and has never looked back. And has been the daddy that his kids have needed, even in the loss of their mom. And since then has gotten remarried to a wonderful woman, and God has blessed his life. But that doesn't happen if you say decline. It doesn't happen if you let it go to voicemail and you don't pick it up. Even when God calls, I know it's disruptive, but it will take you to the place where God wants you to be. Like this other guy in my grace group. We call them grace groups. They're just smaller groups of people. These business guys, we get together every Tuesday night, and we share life together. We look in the Bible. And this guy, I've been on a journey with him for 2 years now. And for 2 years, every day, this is how we come to grace group. He'd say, Greg, I just want to make it clear. I don't believe in any of this stuff. But my wife wants me to come, so I'm here. My wife wants me to come to church, so I go. But I don't believe in it. And I just challenged him about a year and a half ago, would you just start reading the Bible? And just this last winter, he came to this place in his life where he didn't believe in God. But I've been telling him, you know what, you're not going to believe until you take a step of faith. Take the step of faith and God's going to help you with the faith part. Because there's nothing more I can tell you. And it's like at a certain point, it's like getting into a jump rope. You know, you ever seen them do that double Dutch thing? You wonder, how do they do that? At a certain point, you just got to jump in. You just have to take the step of faith. You just have to burn the plow of doubt and unbelief and just say, God, I'm just doing what you said. And you said believe, so I'm doing it. And he did that. And he came to me and he said, Greg, you know when you said that prayer up there on the stage? I said that prayer. And I didn't believe it, but I said it. And now I believe. And I wish I could explain that to you. I can't. But he rewards obedience. And he burned the plow of unbelief, and he burned the plow of his doubts, and God blessed him and took him into the next place where he wanted to take him into a relationship with God. It isn't like that woman in our church who a couple years ago, she told me, after hearing a message on relationships, she said, you know, I need to stop dating. I do. I need to burn the plow on these relationships because in order for me to ever have a healthy marriage, I need to know who I am. And I can't figure out who I am when I got some guy on my arm or when I'm on some guy's arm. And I can't know who God is. And instead of building a relationship with a guy and trying to get my security there, I'm going to burn that plow. I'm going to shut that door for this next year, and I'm not going to date. Now, this is a courageous decision. This is a decision she wanted to make. Best decision of her life. Almost exactly a year later, she got engaged to a guy. She got married. She's happily married to him. I'm not going to tell you his name, but he plays the bass guitar up here. But she had to burn a plow to get to where God wanted her to go. Ask her if she has any regrets about that year decision, which probably seemed really difficult in the moment, but was the best decision she made so that she could do what God wanted her to do. So what is your plow? Doesn't even have to be something negative. Oftentimes, the most difficult thing are just the things that are good that we found our security in, and like that monkey, we're afraid to let him go. I'm just afraid. I know God's calling me to start a business, but I'm afraid. I get my 401k, and I've got the insurance benefits, and I've got all this, and God's saying, but come. Oh, man, you don't know what's out here, but what if I fail? But come. And the first step is that hard step. And maybe the plow that you need to burn is just saying, okay, God, I'm going to take that step. There are a lot of people that end up in our island because they take that step of faith. We have people in our church who come here and are part of our church now because they felt like God said, I want you to go there, and I want you to be a part, and I want you to use your life and reach people there. And they came. And they came. So what is that plow? For some of us, as this one woman told me, it was her friendships. She needed to change her friendships because she really wanted to do what God wanted her to do. But she kept getting sucked back into smoking weed, into drinking, into the same old nightclub scene. And as she looked at her life and trailed the source, she realized that it was her friends who were smoking weed, drinking, and the same old nightclub scene. So as much as she wanted to go forward, she had some plows that she was holding on to that were keeping her stuck in the past. But there came a place where she said, you know what, I want what God wants more than what they want. And so I am going to take a step to make new friends. And she went and she made some new friends. I'm going to tell you about one more guy. I think this is really important. I have this friend who wanted to be a minister, wanted to help plant churches, wanted to do great things for God. He had this area of his life that he knew he could never do these things with unless he dealt with this area of his life. And he looked at his phone, and he looked at his iPad, and he looked at his computer, and he realized that because of his phone, and because of his iPad, because of his computer, and because of the easy access to pornography and all these things, that he had to burn a plow. And he wanted his marriage to be saved, because his marriage was getting rocked by this thing. And so here's what he did. He took his iPhone, and he took his computer, and he took his iPad, and he took him to the garage, and he busted out a hammer, and he busted out a bat, and he took his computer, he took his bat to the computer, and he took his hammer to the iPad. And some of you're going, that's really extreme, right? You're going like, and I was honestly thinking the same thing. I was like, hey, I'm not struggling with that. Why don't you just let me have the phone? It's not bothering me. But he needed to burn a plow so that he could go forward to do what God wanted him to do. If you've got to do that and then put safeguards on the rest of his equipment, do it. There's nothing more important in your life than the call of God, big or small. And God wants you and I to be people who, even though we don't fully understand, we have the faith to obey immediately. And people who, even though we may not be fully equipped or we don't think we have what it takes, your God looks at you and he says, man, if I call you, that means I believe in you. I think you can. And it's not just a matter of how much you can or can't do. It's a matter of how much you're willing to let go of to do what God wants you to do. And I believe that many of you are going to have today plow burning faith. So where's the area that you need to let God burn in your life? Is it an area of sin that's holding you back? Is it a relationship that's holding you back? Is it a job situation? Could be a good thing that is just holding you back from saying yes to God. I believe today that God is going to give you faith to be able to respond to Him so that you can experience the life and the faith that He wants you to experience so that you can make a difference with your life.